golden days drifting far away. Light is leaving town. Colors fade, but I'm thinking we stay just for a little while. Let's lose track of time. Darling, stay for a little longer while I hold your time will wait. So just rest your head upon my shoulder, nothing in our way.
Going on, guys? Hope everyone is doing well today. So I'm in my car. I'm back from Hawaii. I did a video on my Neo in Hawaii, and I had my mic not recording because the battery died. So basically, it was in a really beautiful location right on the ocean, and instead I'm in cornfields in Illinois. Kind of blows. Haven't really been super excited to be back because the weather and gray. We actually have a little sun out today, so figured to get out and do something. Anxiety, depression kind of hasn't been super amazing lately, being back from paradise, but at the same time, not probably many drone guys talking about mental wellness and health, but at the same time, it's a reality for all of us, including people flying drones. So yeah, at least I'm honest and saying this is not always easy, but a lot of times the drones kind of act like a therapeutic thing for me. So I figure why not go ahead and fly and try to talk a little story with my Neo. So essentially, here, let me get this thing out. I got yesterday from DJI, I sent in my Neo because it wasn't acquiring satellites, and I apparently see that it's an issue online with other people, but regardless, wasn't acquiring satellites, really was not ideal because I was in Hawaii with some winds, water in the ocean, and it would go in and out of satellites, meaning it would go into ADI mode, and that was not fun. Fortunately, I could handle ADI mode, but it wasn't safe flying with a little drone like that, so I would land it and just kind of call it a day. But it was happening repeatedly, so I sent it in. They sent me back a brand new in the box Neo, and I went to activate it yesterday, updated the firmware, and it took literally 10 minutes to establish a home point. So I haven't even tried again after yesterday's attempt because I was just kind of frustrated, and it seems to be an issue with the Neo series drone. So I figured let's try again. Outside, I was outside yesterday as well, but regardless, it was still taking 10 minutes. But let's try with the video and see what happens in a real life scenario. I'll take it out of the box and we shall see what unfolds. On a side note, whoop, kind of loud. I use these gloves when I'm flying, and they're very inexpensive. They're called AG gloves. So A gloves essentially, meaning they're lined with silver. They're really lightweight, just enough to kind of keep you warm, but at the same time, I could still control my iPhone. See, it turns on, blah, blah, blah. So I have full functionality with these gloves because of the silver intertwined in them. And they're, I think, $10 to $20, if that, on Amazon. I'll give some pairs away. I have an extra large in the exact same one like this. So this is a lighter weight one. They have ones that are a sport glove that I believe are like ribbed a little bit. So these polar sport gloves, and they have some ribbing on them. So they're a little thicker and a little bit warmer, but at the same time, I really like the minimal feel of just these gloves. But I got a navy blue XL in sport. I have XL regular one, like the ones I'm rocking right now, if you can rock red gloves. And then I have another regular one in black in XL. So I'll give these guys away. Let me know if you think they'll fit, and I can get them your way as a nice gesture. Thank you for those who subscribe. If you haven't, please do. I'm trying to really work on this channel this year. 2025 is kind of a good thing. I was talking to Darren, this guy who's a colorist and has a really nice channel on color grading, and he said he started his YouTube channel at 52, so kind of inspiring. I just turned 52. My channel's a little older, but I really didn't put a lot of focus on it until probably a few years ago. So with that being said, if you haven't, hit the subscribe button. Talk mainly drones, some tech, some computer stuff, some little mental, wellness and caregiving tips, but mainly it's photography. I'm a photographer by trade, videographer, and drone stuff. So pretty heavily into drones and Atort and DJI and all kinds of stuff, but more cinematic kind of stuff. So if you haven't, subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and yeah, I appreciate that. So let's go ahead and get this guy. I'm going to take the gloves off because I'm in my car and it's relatively warm, and we shall see what happens. So one thing with the Neo, or with any drone, pay attention to the winds. This does not do really well in winds. I saw the flags blowing. I think I'll use something like UAV Forecast, which is a great app for those who are wanting to know conditions for flying. And it says 8 to 14 mile an hour winds right now. So that's pretty good. That's a good limit for the Neo. But let's go ahead and get this guy out. The only reason it's in the box like that is because I'm probably going to send this thing back because I'm having issues with it still. So we shall see. And what I talked about a lot in Hawaii about the Neo, this thing is great for certain things. It's not great for sending it in high winds and crazy surf or whatever when I was out there, but it's great for flying super tiny gaps. You can go out and look at everything in a different light. You don't look at it like a big picture scenario. You look for little gaps or little palm tree openings or anything that you can do with something so small like this as opposed to a Mavic 3 Pro or something larger. So there's that, and there's also flying over people because we can do that legally with this drone. So those two things alone can get you some really exceptional B-roll footage like I got in Hawaii flying this tree, as you can see. So something like this, it was really tough to keep it going in the higher winds, and because there's a 1-axis gimbal on this guy. So if it was a 3-axis gimbal, it would behave much better. But it's a 1-axis gimbal, so between that and higher winds and being so light, it just doesn't really shine. But to go through little gaps to maybe get to another scene that you may want to fly with another drone, or flying over people in a nice, respectful way still, just because you can doesn't mean you should be obnoxious about it. But I flew over some people snorkeling and stuff, and pretty innocent. Nobody really gets upset. It's a small profile drone. So anyway, that was kind of the gist of it. It does have a purpose, and again, it's $200. So $200 drone, very low risk. Definitely a great beginner drone, probably the best beginner drone out there in my opinion, as long as the GPS thing is not working. So for 200 bucks, it's easy to send it. It crashed. This one hasn't, but I crashed my other one a bunch of times. Not the one that sent in, like a prior one, I had a few, and that crashed a bunch of times and zero issues with it. So anyway, let's get this thing powered on. I'm going to depress it. Boom, boom. One quick short hold, one long hold. I'm going to get my RCN2 controller out. Oh. So I got this little case for it, which is Skyreet. Regardless, I can put a link in the description below. It actually fits the batteries and the drone. I don't even have the controller in here. I better have the controller in the bag. There we go. We got the RCN2 controller. I'm going to put the sticks in. Normally I use these extended sticks, but I actually have kind of liked the shorter standard sticks for flying. Doesn't really cause an issue. But let's go ahead and see what happens. Oh, come on, where's my phone? Power this guy on. We'll start a screen recording in a second. I'm going to force quit all my apps to make sure nothing's running in the background. So just boom, swipe all of them up, get them out of there. So we have nothing interfering. Oop. Come on. I'm going to get into the Fly app and watch. I'm sure right now I'll have no issue with it acquiring satellites, but let's go ahead and see. Make sure it's doing a screen recording. It is. Go Fly. Again, yesterday I updated the firmware, activated the drone, and we'll see what happens. So let's go ahead and get this thing out of harm's way so it's not directly in the sun, and we can see real time. Now, mind you, it's here. It's not outside, but it shouldn't be an issue. I'll put it right here. There. Boom. Let's try to balance it. It's all about balance. There we go. So yesterday, as I said, it took literally 10 minutes to acquire a home point and get satellites to where I could actually fly. And I still wouldn't have felt very confident with that. Okay, there we go. Home point was updated. And we have 11 satellites. Not a ton, but enough, and it established a home point. So that's at least good, but still wasn't great yesterday, taking 10 minutes. I'll probably send it back in just to make certain, but let's go ahead and see. I'll launch this thing, send it out the window, and we shall see what happens. There's a lot to talk about with this drone. I talked about a bunch when I was in Hawaii, but again, that was a failed mission. But if you look at this drone on nice, ideal condition days, to either follow you around like I did in Hawaii, it can be really fun and a creative tool. That's not a lot of money if something happens. It's not a big deal. It's $200. So don't have huge expectations for this drone. It is what it is. It's $200. You can't go wrong with it. It's probably the most fun I've had with the $200 anything in quite a bit. So without further ado, we'll get this guy in the air. See how it's still bouncing around with no satellites? So this is what was happening in Hawaii. And when I'm over raging surf, like pipeline at 12, 14 feet, and this thing's happening with the full crowd of people on the beach, guess what? Not super fun. So right now it just went down to 10 satellites with no GPS. So this is a real issue. Maybe I won't even go too far with it today, meaning I won't even do much more than address the issue that there is an issue with this NEO drone acquiring satellites. So it's going back in. Here, I'm going to put it by the windowsill. And look at this. It's going backwards now from a home point to no satellites. This little drone, any drone, if you're not familiar, can be kind of sketch or totally sketch, like a car going on a slick ice road on ice skates. So if this is in ADI mode and you don't know what you're doing, it's essentially like flying an FPV drone. If you do know what's up, it's not that big of a deal to kind of reel it back in and bring it home safely. But if you're not familiar, you're going to get freaked out and it's going to most likely crash. So we got 13 satellites. I'm going to go ahead and get it out just because I can. Okay. Maybe if I get it a little higher. I'll roll up the window. There we go. Sound effects included. So a few things I noticed when I was in Hawaii and looking at all my footage from this drone. Let me get this thing out of the road in case I'm not paying attention and a car comes. Okay. A few little pointers. You definitely ideally want ND filters. I didn't bring mine with me because I'm not doing it, but I do have ND filters for it. You definitely don't want to be in auto white balance, and you definitely don't want to be in auto mode, so meaning exposure mode, because it can fluctuate and it looks really unprofessional. And if you're going to try to get something that's worthy, you want to make sure you're fully flying in manual exposure and manual auto balance or white balance. So those two things alone will help out a lot. And using the remote is a huge thing for actually having control over your NEO. So we got 23 satellites right now. We're good. I'm going to go ahead and make sure we're still screen recording. We are. And then I'm going to go out of auto and go into pro. And I got to get these things toggled off, these auto modes, because it's still wanting an auto thing. It's still wanting to be an auto, essentially. We're going to go ahead and maybe change the exposure. I'm looking at the histogram to see where I'm at. And I'm a little overexposed by a third of a stop. But to me, that's fine. And I'm going to physically, just so you're aware, flying these trees right now. I haven't flown these guys. But if you see, the key thing to flying gaps with these little drones, not FPV, but I'm sure with FPV as well, make sure you have all these grids enabled, especially this little center point. because that center point is essentially the crosshair. See that little guy? If I point that right at that tree, guess what? I'm going to hit that tree. So essentially, you want to look at the drone physically and see where it's going through the gap and reference this to also see. So it's kind of a balance again on looking at that little crosshair and pointing it and aiming it in the right direction, but also physically looking at the drone to try to see as much as you can, just try to get as much data or info as you can visually so you can make it through, and we'll see what happens with this. See if I can, I'm sitting in the car. Normally I'd probably get out for this, but let's go ahead and record. I'm going to put it in sport mode too, or no, I'll put it in normal mode. Sometimes I put it in sport mode because this little guy has an issue fighting the wind. So sport mode is actually kind of the equivalent to a normal mode or even a cine mode for like a Mavic 3 Pro. So it's just, hopefully we'll see what happens. So I'll start recording. I'm going to go ahead and look at the drone. So I'm looking outside. I'm also looking at the crosshairs. The hard thing with this is, right now I'm not looking at the drone because it doesn't really matter. I'm just looking at the crosshair and my screen. But these little branches, when they don't have leaves on them, is challenging. But as you see, I'm not fluctuating exposure. My hands are both on the sticks. I'm going to raise altitude a little bit. There's not a lot of winds, and it's doing pretty well. I guess I'm doing pretty well too. Now we have the conundrum on where I fly for this. Maybe I'll fly up a little higher. Oh, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with this gap. Let's see. Oh, okay. So that wasn't perfect, but you see, my whole point was to not crash. I didn't want to crash while I'm doing this because it's not worth it. So I'll go ahead and get around and hightail around. But you can see that's another little way that this drone is super killer. You can fly through teeny little gaps that you probably wouldn't feel comfortable flying on another drone. The battery's also a thing with this. It doesn't last very long, so have a few of them. I have 4, and you always want to make sure they're fully charged so you go out and you actually get a relatively respectful flight time or experience or ability to get some shots with that flight. So let me go ahead and see. I can see the drone right now. And essentially, I do want to land it. So I don't want to go and take another chance because this thing gets really weird when it gets low. And let's just bring it back home. Come on, little Neo. Neo is kind of like a friend. It's almost like a pet. Feel like, come on, little Neo, let's go. Here we come. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Come on, little Neo. So here it is. And all you have to do, put your hand out, boom. Thank you, Neo, for doing such a good job and getting a little shot for me. So kind of cool, kind of fun. We can maybe try that again. And let's go ahead and exchange the battery. I'm going to power this guy down. And it's also a test to see if we acquire satellites easily this time or not. So boom, take the battery out. A little depress this guy. Boom, really light little battery. I got a hub that comes with the Fly More combo. And we're going to make sure, we're going to check the battery levels. And you see they're all, I don't know if you can see that, but if they're all solid red, see that one? That one isn't fully charged, but the other ones are staying solid green, sorry, not solid red. So these two are fully charged. So I'll go ahead and take one of those, put this guy back into the hub. But you can see, if I wasn't talking and doing all that and I had an idea of what that ending, Let me wipe my nose. It's cold out. I don't like the cold. If I knew what that little gap opening was like, maybe if it was nicer out, I'd go walk and just kind of see so I get a visual of what I'm looking at or seeing. So let's go ahead and get this guy out one more time. I think the video is 20 minutes. So I can wrap right now. That may be the best thing. I know a lot of people don't like longer videos, but you can see some of the positive aspects of this drone, and that's one of them. Flying through gaps, flying over people, but we need to address this thing not acquiring satellites the correct way and actually losing satellites, because that's not good for a drone like this, because it's hard to see, it's hard to control sometimes if it's windy. So with that being said, I'm going to keep it short this time. Aloha, subscribe, and let me know if you guys have any issues with your Neo, with anything, acquiring satellites mainly, in the comments below. And until next time, peace.